Good day and welcome back to the Defense Support Podcast. And again, we've got Babcock CEO Tony March. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here, Stewart.
Babcock's had quite the summer. The government announced the Victoria in-service support contract for the end of service life for the submarine. And Babcock has been doing a lot of wildfire fighting in Manitoba again. Manitoba gave the contract for in-service to the water bombers back in 2019, a 10-year contract. It's 3 years out until the end of the contract. So do you want to tell us more about that?
Yeah, so we operate and maintain the aerial firefighting capability for the province of Manitoba. It's unfortunately been another busy fire season. We've flown just under 300 missions and over 1,200 hours of firefighting operations in Manitoba this year, with quite a bit more of the season left to run. That's a critical service that we provide to the province of Manitoba, and something that we're really proud of as a company to be able to continue to do. We generate over 99% operational availability of some of those water bombers and the supporting aircraft that go into delivering that mission. And we've got a really strong, dedicated team out there that operates in pretty tough conditions and some remote bases to deliver that service. I had the pleasure of being out and visiting some of that earlier this year personally, and it's really inspiring to see the quality of work that they do in something that is, as I said, unfortunately becoming more and more of an issue every summer in Canada as we get longer, more intense fire seasons.
Yeah, so this year so far, the stats are 4.1 million hectares have been burned across the country. 4,600 wildfires again year to date, which is roughly on par with the past 2 years. However, last year was even more devastating. We had 7.5 million hectares burned across the country. So, I mean, you guys are definitely doing a good job in Manitoba.
Yeah, just in Manitoba alone, it's over 263,000 hectares that's burned. And just to put that in context, that's larger than the size of Rhode Island has burned in the province of Manitoba. And again, so you see like millions of hectares across the country. And it's, last year, like 2 years ago was a very, very intense fire season, but like the overall trend is quite clearly going towards longer, more intense and larger seasons every year.
This year, the government announced that it was going to sell 10 Hercules aircraft to Coulson, a BC-based aerospace company, for essentially not a water bomber, but a fire retardant firefighting aircraft. Do you think this is going to impact your services in Manitoba at all?
I don't think it'll impact our delivery in Manitoba. The aircraft and Coulson that they're doing, those are the non-amphibious water bombers. So they have to return to a runway, get tanked up, and then drop again. I think what you're seeing in that is, the Canadian government is recognizing that they need to contribute, or there's more capacity that's needed for national emergency response. We're in that space, we operate in that business, and we're certainly keen to, continue to grow our operations and support other provinces and Canada in the future on that program.
The last time you were on, we were talking during CanSec. It was the busiest that it's been in years, right? We were also talking about the small medium enterprises that form the chain for not only just the Canadian military industry but also Babcock itself. Do you feel that there's been any positive change or negative change since then?
I think that it takes a while for some of these policy changes and some of these changes in direction to really filter down into the supply chain. What I would highlight is probably a big significant change since CanSec has been the update to the ITB policy, which has got some additional benefits in how multipliers are treated for small medium enterprise. That's a significant policy shift that's occurred and is going to start to drive benefit in the supply chain. It's certainly causing us as an organization with an ITB obligation to look at our supply chains and look at how we deliver some of that. So I think that's probably, since CanSec, the most tangible thing that I've seen in terms of that, in terms of change. How that will take time to roll out into contracts and subcontracts and actually influence those small medium enterprises. But the policy environment is definitely been some positive movement if you're an SMB.
Perfect. I mean, I think the stat was, I think 87% of Canada's military industry is actually small to medium enterprises. And yeah, it's a significant chunk. I've been actually wanting to take a look at what that compares to European countries, but I still haven't had the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, it's a big part of our supply chain. We have hundreds of Canadian suppliers that contribute to the Victoria class program as well as our aviation program. So it's absolutely critical for delivery of any defense capability is relying on those national supply chains. And the government's got a clear trajectory, enhance and improve that.
So let's delve deeper into the Victoria class submarine in-service support contract. So it's a 6-year, $1.1 billion extension to maintain the fleet until the new Type 12 CD from TKMS can come in online, so well into the 2030s. This year, the HMS Corner Brook actually torpedoed a decommissioned warship at RIMPAC. Do you want to explain a little bit more what is happening right now with the Victoria class submarines?
Yeah, so it's the Victoria class submarines have been in service in Canadian service since the late 1990s, early 2000s. Babcock has had the good fortune of being leading the industry in-service support provision for that since 2008. The most recent extension takes us through 6 years plus option years out, significantly past that, really to the end of life of the class. So we take it as a real positive step that Canada has confirmed and got all the enablers they need to continue to operate the Victoria class through to its end of life. So that does a number of things. The first thing that it does is continue to sustain a really important defense capability for Canada. And yes, although these submarines are over 30 years of age, they've been continuously updated. We've participated in that. And you can see, fundamentally, the operational effectiveness is there. The Royal Canadian Navy was able to demonstrate tangibly what operational capability submarines bring to the table at RIMPAC. It's a second SYNC-X that a Victoria class submarine has done. So I think that capability is there. So now there's a path to sustain the Victoria class submarine through to the transition for the future Type 212 CD when that enters service in the 2030s. So that's the first thing that it does. And then the second thing from an industry perspective is that it sustains the sovereign industrial base that's been built up over the last 2 decades around submarine sustainment. So, there's an enterprise with ourselves, with our partners, with Canada that's delivering that capability today. So the direct employment, just the direct employment for the submarine refit activity that we undertake out in British Columbia is over 600 people. And that's not counting into the supply chain. That's between Babcock and our direct partners that deliver that work. So this contract is a real key enabler to keep that expertise and that cadre of submarine experienced people working and provides a foundation that allows a bridge to the next class. And although that class will be operated on 2 different coasts, it'll be much bigger. The whole size of that submarine fleet is tripling potentially. So this extension to VISC really sustains that hard-won capability that's been built up over time.
Yeah, I always love the up to 12, so we don't really know how many submarines we're going to end up with. Going forward, though, so as Babcock does continue in-service support with, the Vic class, infrastructure upgrades going to need to be made around Esquimalt and, of course, Halifax. Halifax doesn't have the facilities Esquimalt does right now. How is that going to impact Babcock operations there? And would you seek partnership with the government to try to enhance and build that infrastructure?
So the government of Canada under CPSP, they've made it really clear that they want a sovereign sustainment capability, and that's subject to a separate procurement process that's currently underway. There was a request for information that was out earlier this year. We certainly responded to that. There's been reporting in the media about Canada's intention to build new purpose-built infrastructure for the new submarine capability. So, that's being progressed and, under the leadership of Canada, we're certainly keen to participate in that future sustainment activity. So it's certainly a focus for us as a company being the incumbent and the current prime contractor about how we can best take the sovereign capability we have today, how that can be grown, and how we can best contribute to help Canada, help other partners, help other industry, other elements of industry to deliver that capability. We lead that capability today. We think we've got a really strong offering for the future. Yes, there's going to need to be new infrastructure, and we're keen to work with Canada to figure out what that looks like. What are some of the lessons we've learned over having done this for 2 decades? We can best contribute to that and really get the best outcome for Canada.
Of course, HMS Corner Brook is in active duty. If I remember correctly, two subs right now are in deep maintenance, and one of the subs is kind of in an active ready state. Like it's still being worked on, but it could be used operationally if.
Yeah, so the HMCS Cornbrook's in service with the Royal Canadian Navy. HMCS Victoria is undergoing extended docking work period that we're leading in the Esquimalt Graving Dock. So that submarine's under maintenance. HMCS Windsor is undergoing a third line maintenance activity at Fleet Maintenance Facility Cape Scott. So that's government led. And then HMCS Chicoutimi is in extended readiness. So she's not immediately operationally available. She's alongside in Esquimalt. And the specifics that really it's up for Canada. From our perspective, is we were really focused on providing that third line capability and executing the maintenance work on HMCS Victoria in the extended docking work period she's in. That's where our focus is. That's where our effort goes towards. We obviously support running platforms through provision of maintenance and engineering services and material. But really, as a company, the lion's share of our focus for the submarines is delivering that refit that we have. We are supporting Fleet Maintenance Facility Cape Scott in Halifax with some expertise and some support on that contract. But that activity is really being led by the Navy and by the Fleet Maintenance Facility, whereas we're leading the refit that's underway in Victoria, and just that's where our focus is, Stewart.
Okay. The reason why I bring it up is because, again, we'll get somewhere up to 12 submarines. The Royal Canadian Navy's definitely need experienced personnel to operate these submarines. So I was just wondering if Babcock has obviously it's going to be a wish or an intention, but can Babcock deliver a third operational submarine by, before the end of life service in the 2030s?
Yeah, so we're working on Victoria. It's got a delivery time. That program's on schedule as it stands. So the government's made as part of that VISC extension. It's they're going to need submarines to generate crew, generate operational effect. So we have every intention of delivering HMCS Victoria back to service in the Navy. How long the Victoria class stays in service is really going to be, I think, paced by a combination of the delivery rate of the new submarines, readiness of crews, a whole host of factors. But I think you're seeing Canada knows, and they've learned the lesson from the transition from the Oberon to the Victoria, is having an overlap in those programs, having industrial support coverage and overlap between those programs is important. So that's really there. So we're working to generate a operationally capable and effective submarine out of that refit activity in the form of HMCS Victoria. We'll deliver that back to the Navy, and they'll have options and opportunity to continue generating submariners and generating operational effect.
For those who are unaware, when Canada purchased the Upholder class submarine from the British, the Oberon class was at the very end of its life, and it was kind of a scramble to buy them. And of course, then because of that, we ended up with the Upholder class, and of course, it was recommissioned into the Victoria class, and we didn't really know what we were buying at the time, too. So it's awesome that Babcock has been able to do what it's been able to do. I heard reports that some of the British wiring in the submarines had 1960s design, right? And if anyone had an old MG or a 1960 Jaguar, that they weren't very reliable.
Yeah, the Victoria class date, like the design origins of them date from the early 1980s. The first Victoria class entered service with the Royal Navy in the late 80s. The majority were commissioned in the early 1990s. They're aged assets. They're still very capable, but definitely, they're towards the end of their service life. I think your point, Stewart, is, when Canada brought the Victoria class, they not only brought the Victoria class, they stood up an industrial capability. Before all the Oberon support was done in-house, they've stood up an industrial capability that's been hard earned, hard developed over 2 decades. And what we're seeing with the transition into CPSP is that the conditions are set for success to do that. So we're certainly really keen to see that bridge happen, to see that transition happen in a manner that continues to deliver. And there's a whole bunch of elements. We've talked about infrastructure, we talked about having industrial capability. The Navy's got needs submarines available to generate the crews to go on to the future. So I think you're starting to see all the blocks line up that are needed to be successful. Industry capability and industry capacity is definitely part of that, but being able to hand that baton over and run it as a relay race and not stop and then start again, I think is going to be really positive. And I'm encouraged as I look forward to the introduction of the new class that Canada has set the conditions for success going forward.
No, the preparation work must be just strenuous too, not only just on policy standard, but also for you guys and all the other SMEs that form that logistical maintenance chain.
Yeah, submarines are a challenge, and they're unique, and that's, I think, something that I want your listeners to really kind of take away is that it's difficult work that's not the same as working on a surface ship. Platforms are more complex, they're more mechanically dense, there's more equipment in tight spaces, the quality standards are much, much, much higher. So all those things, you need specialized expertise to do it. And it takes a long, long time to build that expertise and have experience in doing it. So, being able to train and understand is one thing, but actually having the expertise and having done it is something else. So, we're certainly proud of the capability we have.
Do you have any estimation of when the in-service support contract for CPSP will be announced?
We don't. I think we've seen as Canada's moved very, very quickly on CPSP. I would not be surprised if the in-service support moved equally quickly. We said RFI was out in the spring. We're looking for the next round of industry engagements and seeing what Canada does in that space. Certainly something that we're keenly following and focused on, and will be a real focus for Babcock as we look forward through the rest of 2026 and into 2027.
No, I think you're right that it'll be announced much sooner than a lot of the other Canadian procurement projects in the past, which have sometimes spanned decades. And sometimes have failed because the time has just kind of run out, right? So it is encouraging to see that this government has moved so quickly on such a complex procurement process.
Yeah, I see. It's tangible evidence, right? We talked a number of things about some different opportunities. You are seeing these things move quickly. In service, acquiring the equipment is one thing. Acquiring the in-service support and the sovereign in-service support capability that Canada desires is something else. But they've got an opportunity to do so. So we're not anxiously, but we're following the process, contributing to it, and looking forward to being part of the solution in the future.
And I'd also suspect that it would have to be announced sooner as well, because as the infrastructure builds, right, and as submarines may come online within, it's 2026 now, so within 10 years we might get one. That in-service support contract has to be inset so we can actually adapt to the new challenges and the new bases, correct?
Yeah, TKMS is they publicly stated they're getting a submarine in relatively early in the 2030s. They're in contract negotiations now. It will come very, very quickly. To your point, infrastructure needs to happen. That needs to happen very quickly. Infrastructure build out, capacity limit, all of these things. But it's being ready for that submarine, I'd say, and the transition support starts. It's not just setting up the infrastructure, it's all the supporting data systems, all the supporting maintenance plans, regimes, getting everything ready so that when that submarine arrives, the spare parts are there, the technicians are trained for the maintenance, the technical data and the publications are all available and accessible for those folks that need it. There's a lot of work that has to happen, a lot of integrated logistics support beyond just the actual being able to turn the wrenches to do the maintenance. There's a lot of things and a lot of enablers that need to get ready to be there. Physical infrastructure is part of it, but all those supporting pieces are really important as well. And the early 2030s will come fast. It will be there before we know it in terms of program readiness. So yeah, the faster Canada can move, that's certainly some of the things we've signaled to them. The importance of contracting the in-service support as close to the acquisition as they can is really important and an enabler, so that when new submarines arrive alongside the jetties in Halifax and Victoria, Canada has everything they need to operate them effectively and get the maximum value out of those assets.
Before I close up the podcast, I just want to, I have a general rule just to throw back at the guest. Is there anything that you want to discuss that we haven't before?
I don't think so, Stewart. I think if there's one thing that I'd want your listeners to take away, or two things that I'd want them to take away, is first, like, there is tangible change in what's happening in the defense space. That increase in spending, that increase in expenditure that Canada is making is manifesting itself. We're seeing increased volumes. We're seeing increased activity and benefit for Canadians. Babcock's hiring staff. We're buying more components. We're out in the supply chain. So that effect is starting to, the changes are going to have positive effect. The second is that submarines are are different. They are not surface ships. It's a limited set of experience. It's a limited number of it's highly specialized. And just as we go through that, understanding the value in having experienced submarine knowledgeable organizations as part of the defense ecosystem is really important going forward.
On that note, we're going to close up today's Defense Support podcast. Tony, thank you very much for coming on. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Always a pleasure, Stewart. Thanks you for the opportunity.
And I'll see you at CanSec next year, and hopefully maybe we can grab a pint or something.
I will definitely be there, guaranteed.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.